The following program is brought to you in part by the film Backdoor Channels, The Price of Peace.
So it was about 2-3 years ago, and I last saw Alan Dershowitz. We were both in Jerusalem, invited by the President of Israel to discuss the future of Judaism and the relationship that Israel has to the future of Judaism, and has relationship in sense to the people of France and Germany, USA, etc., etc. Remember that, Alan?
I do. I remember it very well. One of the things that stimulated me to write my book was that conference.
I'm sure. I remember your remark, in fact. You said that the Jew is going to vanish. Assimilation was coming, which leads us to the book that Alan's just written called The Vanishing American Jew, which we'll talk about for 1 hour. We'll see how he's vanishing. Anyway, at that conference, we had some heavies. It was sort of the top 50 Jews of, I guess, the world, wasn't it? And it was interesting. But basically, Ezer Weitzman, who's a very close friend of mine, thinks that you're not a Zionist unless you physically live in Israel. You're pro-Zionist if you are like you and me, care about Israel. But we found a lot of different things going on there. You remember that?
I do, and I remember, too, that I was fairly critical of Ezer Weitzman, who I also like, but he made the point
He remembers that, too.
Yes, that Zionism, you should go to Israel because things are going to be bad elsewhere.
Right.
That a Jew has no future in America, in France, in England, that for negative reasons you have to come to Israel. And the thesis of my book is that negative Judaism has had its day. We're living in the post-persecution era. We have to have better reasons to be Jews than that because our enemies are going to oppress us. We have to have better reasons to be Zionists than that our enemies are going to oppress us. I start my book with a wonderful story of Napoleon trying to win the Pale of Settlement from the Tsar, and the great original Lubavitcher Rebbe, Schneur Zalman, prays for the Tsar and not Napoleon. And he says, if Napoleon wins, things will be good for the Jews, but they'll leave God. Whereas if the Tsar wins, things will be terrible for the Jews, but they'll stay with God. That kind of Tsurist theory of Jewish survival, which our friend Ezer Weitzman also, I think, believes in, will not, I believe, succeed. We have to have positive reasons for being Jews, positive reasons for wanting to go to Israel and to be Zionists.
All right, last week I gave a speech to about 3,000 Jews at the Concord Hotel. And I said, what does Jackie Robinson, Swiss bank accounts, and Aryeh Deri have in common to the Jewish people? Jackie Robinson proved that two people can come together and make compromise, and you can break barriers, which anti-Semitism in this country has really been lowered, which is one of the theses of yours. Swiss gold or Swiss bank accounts proves that Jews have never been strong in their lives. We could attack the Swiss banks and they collapsed on us. 30 years ago, when you were in BTA and I was in Rabbi Jacob Joseph, we wouldn't believe that you could attack Swiss bank accounts. It was impossible. We became very strong and very powerful, and things are really good for the Jews. And Aryeh Deri, he's under indictment and possibly under another indictment, proves that if you have hubris and really no humility, and you're carrying the religious flag, the whole country gets in a maze. So Jews, when they get strong and they get powerful, start to fight amongst themselves.
Well, we haven't had too much experience being strong and powerful.
Right.
And we are very good at being victims. We are wonderful at resisting persecution. When I think about what the people at the Theresian and Birkenau and Auschwitz camps did, putting on symphonies and having plays, we are so good at trying to resist persecution. This may be the first time in modern American and Jewish history when we can't count on our persecutors to keep us Jewish.
Right. So you know what I said at the end of the speech? You know what's going to keep us Jewish?
What?
Farrakhan.
Well, I have a story about that from my book. A woman, this is actually true, a woman from a major university calls me and says, we need you to come to our university because Jews don't think of themselves as Jews. We need somebody to bring us together. I said, sure, call me in a month. I'm busy this month. I'll do it next month. She calls me a month later. She says, we don't need you. Somebody better is coming. They invited Farrakhan, and she's organized the whole Jewish community. But why do we need an SOB anti-Semite like Farrakhan to keep us Jews?
That's exactly the point. That's the point I raised over the weekend.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right.
And I said, what will it do? It'll bring all the factions together. We'll be able to hate together, and therefore we'll be united again. Look, it's an old story. If the Arabs left the Jews alone, they'd fight amongst themselves.
Herzl said it in 1897, 100 years ago. He said, if our Christian hosts were to leave us alone for 2 generations, we would merge into the surrounding races. Albert Einstein said that without anti-Semites, Jews would vanish. Jean-Paul Sartre, a non-Jew, said it's the anti-Semite who makes the Jew. Maybe it takes chutzpah of me to say that the Lubavitcher Rabbi, Albert Einstein, Theodor Herzl, and Sartre are all wrong. They better be wrong, because we will not survive if we need enemies to keep us together.
Sad. It's a sad commentary.
No, but it's also very positive, because now that we don't have as much persecution, there's still plenty of anti-Semitism, but it's not from the top down. They don't tell us where we can live, where we can work, where we can go to school. Now we can really make something so positive of our Jewishness. Achad Ha'am, 80 years ago, said the secret of Jewish survival is 3 things: learning, learning, and learning. We have this incredible library. I'm teaching a course next year at Harvard Law School on the scriptural sources of justice. I want my students to know about the Torah, the Mishnah, the Gemara. And I'm primarily a secular Jew, but I study the Torah and the Talmud every single day. Not because God told me to, but because it makes me a better lawyer, a better teacher, a better person. 3,500 years of arguments, starting with God arguing with Abraham, and Abraham arguing with God about the innocent and guilty people of Saddam. This is an incredible tradition. And Jews, this is going to be shocking to your audience, Jews are the most ignorant people in America when it comes to their traditions and their religions. They're the most educated when it comes to secular material. But more Jews can tell you the name of Jesus' mother than Abraham's father. More Christians can recite the 10 Commandments than Jews can. More Muslims know the story of Abraham than Jews do. We're ignoramuses. The Yiddish cup is half empty.
Why is that, Al?
Because we're so ambitious and so oriented towards success. And frankly, because the Jewish education in America has not been up to what we demand of secular education. I think the bar mitzvah deal, particularly for conservative and reform Jews, has been a disaster. The deal is, kids, I got good news, I got bad news. The bad news is you're going to have to miss soccer practice and miss going to the mall for a few years so that you have to learn something by heart from the Torah or Haftorah portion. And the good news is you'll never have to learn anything Jewish again your whole life if you memorize your Haftorah portion. And so we lock our children into a 7th grade view of Judaism, which isn't enough to prepare them for college. And when they come to college, they're challenged and they're confronted. They don't know how to argue back. They don't know how to defend their tradition. And we have an obligation to devote much more money now to Jewish education rather than Jewish defense. The days of the sacred survival period, from the Holocaust really to the end of the Soviet Union, we devoted all of our energies to saving Soviet Jews, to saving Ethiopian Jews, to saving Jews from around the world, to saving Israel. Now we have to shift our priorities. We have to still defend, but we have to shift our priorities toward more positive education.
You had a yeshiva background.
Right.
What transformed you into a secular Jew? Probably most of your friends probably remained, in a sense, I don't want to call them provincial, but in that narrow cast. You know, the yeshiva boys who grew up in high school.
Yeah,
and
but they're not narrow and provincial. Some of my friends who are Orthodox are some of the most brilliant, broadly based people. Let me tell you, being Orthodox, being a modern Orthodox Jew is wonderful, because you have to confront modernity. You have to see how your religion interacts with reality, how your reality interacts with religion. I think one of the heroes of my book are modern Orthodox Judaism: Norman Lamb, Yitz Greenberg, Avi Weiss, people like that, who don't shrink away from encountering modernity and confronting religion and modernity. I think it's wonderful.
But they're having a crisis.
They're having a crisis.
I'm a member of the board of Cardozo Law School. Yeshiva University got into problems because they had a gay club.
Right.
And Rabbi Norman Lamb, Dr. Lamb, was confronted by this, and if he gave in to the right wing of the board, he'd lose his federal funding. Sure. So they had crisis.
Look,
and have you read the New York Times
today? A wonderful story about that. Look, the Catholic Church is having crises. Fundamentalist Protestant Church is having crises. The greatest threat to civilization in the 21st century is going to be radical, fundamentalist Christians, Muslims, Jews.
Right.
You give Yigal Amar a nuclear weapon instead of a gun. You give the guy who shot the doctor in Florida, the abortion doctor, a nuclear weapon. You give Muslim fundamentalists nuclear weapons. These are people who God talks to directly. They have tokens to heaven. There's no way of persuading them they're wrong. They read things literally. I have a wonderful quote in my book from a rabbi who grew up in Borough Park, Rabbi Chaim Seidler fellow, who's now the Hillel director at UCLA. And he said, the killing of Rabin took the innocence out of the yeshiva. The yeshiva, for 2,000 years, people would have these discussions. What if somebody did this, and, you know, a rodef, and can you chase him? Now, the yeshiva has kids sitting with Uzis, and they're part of a political process. So you can't read the text so literally. You have to understand in context.
We have to explain that to the audience, that Yigal Amir contended when he shot Rabin that he was a rodef. And rodef means to chase. And if you believe someone is trying to destroy Israel, you're allowed to chase him and, in a sense, pursue him and kill him. And Bar Ilan University suffered greatly because of this. And this was the... and there was a right-wing element in Bar Ilan University.
But Bar Ilan itself shouldn't be tarred with a broad brush. The chancellor of Bar Ilan is one of the most modern, liberal, progressive, Orthodox Jews in the world.
Wonderful
today.
University.
And it's a great university. And it had some Meshuggahs.
Right.
And the Meshuggahs learned from a few rabbis. And those rabbis ought to be criticized. I don't believe they should be indicted, but they ought to be criticized, morally criticized, for allowing their teaching. You know, teaching is such a powerful instrument. People can misunderstand unless you push them in the right direction. And many Islamic teachers have to learn as well. And many Christian fundamentalist teachers. You know, when a Catholic priest says to his audience, it's okay to do anything to stop abortion, some Meshuggah out there is going to say, anything? The priest is telling me to kill. I represented a group of Hare Krishnas that had a problem like that in West Virginia. And this is not a problem unique to Jews. But look, Jews have to deal with it. It's a problem that we have too. Fundamentalism in our community, radical fundamentalism, political extremism, and it's tearing Israel apart and it's tearing the American Jewish community apart.
But what do you think is causing fundamentalism?
An unwillingness to take the risks of modern times. You know, if you don't have to think at all, it's such a comfortable life. You turn to the 613 rules and you look at Rule 12 or look at Rule 88 and you don't have to think. And now with the ultra-Orthodox community, the Chumras, every week there's a new harsh provision that proves that you're more religious than the next person. There was a very interesting article I read at my Seder, which said that many ultra-Orthodox women can't enjoy Pesach, Passover, the greatest holiday. I love Passover. 56 people at my Seder. My whole family comes together. But this
all Jews?
No, not all Jews. We've had Supreme Court justices, we've had judges, we've had many people, Jews and non-Jews.
Jimmy Carter went to Stu Eisenstadt's house for a Seder.
Right.
A lot of people do that, but Orthodox Jews wouldn't accept that.
But it's interesting because, I have some Orthodox Jews who accept that. But it's interesting.
Ultra-Orthodox?
No, not ultra-Orthodox.
Okay.
But the point about this article is that the Jewish women from this group can't enjoy Pesach. They're so busy cleaning, to making sure the last crumb, and women suffer nervous breakdowns. That is not the purpose of Pesach. The purpose of Pesach is joy, remembering, Lador Vador, from generation to generation, telling the story, remembering about freedom. We have a Socratic, a Talmudic seminar, which everybody talks, we have discussions, we say the Haggadah, but we make it relevant.
How does your mother feel about this book?
That's a good question. I was just with my mother tonight. My mother loves me and supports everything I do and say, but she is critical of some things I say in the book. It's interesting, a Hasidic Rebbe wrote me a very interesting letter. He said, I don't like all the words of your book, but I love the music. I think my mother has the same view. She knows it comes from the heart. She knows I love my Judaism. She knows my goal is to see Judaism perpetuated. But look, she is an Orthodox Jew who lives in Borough Park, and for her it's very difficult to accept my questioning and my lifestyle. But I live a very Jewish life, and it's one that I hope at least some other people will see as a possible way of living. And I don't hold myself out as a model for anybody. If I were Orthodox, believe me, it would be easier to make sure that Judaism were perpetuated. Being an Orthodox Jew is the best guarantee of Jewish survival. In fact, I have in my book a joke. I have a 7-step, double your money back guarantee that your children will marry a Jew and live a Jewish life. It's very simple. You move to Muncie, you become a chassid, you no TV, no radio, your children get fixed up and arranged marriages at 16. Your kids will marry. Who wants to live that kind of life? Not me, and not the people who watch your television show, because those people don't watch TV. They don't even watch you. They may be able to watch a videotape of your show, but not the actual show itself, because who knows, they may see a commercial, which isn't proper.
We had a woman who was a survivor, a Satmar Hasidic woman, and they don't have television. But she said, since we're on your television, maybe we'll find one for this weekend to watch it. What he said before was Chomer, which means Chomer, Kal v'Chomer, which comes from the Talmud. One was heavy and one was light. So she became lightheaded on this Chomer. Alan is not a vanishing Jew. He's with us. We'll be right back after commercial. Come back with the new book of Alan Dershowitz. Nothing about OJ in this book. I guarantee it.
In modern Middle East history, only one peace treaty has stood the test of time, the 1978 Camp David Accord. In the new documentary film, Backdoor Channels, The Price of Peace, learn the true story behind the greatest diplomatic achievement of our time and its lessons for the future.
The price of peace is very high. To have this courageous man and my close friend killed.
Winner of the Telly Award for Best Cultural Program. Now available at select stores including Barnes & Noble and online at Amazon.com. Get the book that inspired the award-winning movie, Leon Charney's Backdoor Channels. Learn about the Backdoor Channel negotiations that led to the historic 1978 Israeli-Egyptian peace treaty. Become a witness to history and order Backdoor Channels online at Amazon or Barnes & Noble. Also available at all other retailers and booksellers. Or download the audiobook at iTunes or Audible.com. Relive history. Order Backdoor Channels. Get best-selling author Leon Charney's latest book, The Battle of the Two Talmuds. Join Charney as he explores years of Jewish history to find out why and how Talmudic scholars and rabbis abandoned the Holy Land for the lands of the diaspora. Learn about the power struggles behind the creation of the Jerusalem and Babylonian Talmuds. It's a book critics call engaging and enlightening. A book which will be of interest to people of every faith. Now available at Amazon and Barnes & Noble, or download the audiobook of The Battle of the Two Talmuds at iTunes or Audible.com. Leon Charney sets out to discover the true meaning of the Kaddish, the Jewish custom of reciting a prayer to commemorate the death of a close relative. Join Charney as he finds out the history of the Kaddish and how it has evolved. Reviewed as a refreshing walk through Jewish history and a book that deserves to be read by both Jews and non-Jews, The Mystery of the Kaddish is now available online at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and all other retailers and booksellers. Or download the audiobook at Audible.com or on iTunes. Discover The Mystery of the Kaddish.
We're back. We're speaking with Alan Dershowitz. Needs no introduction. We're not going to talk about O.J. Simpson. But did he do it? No.
You know, Bibi Netanyahu asked me that question when I went to see him in Israel.
Alan has a story in here that he went to see Bibi Netanyahu, the Prime Minister of Israel, and the first thing that Bibi asked Alan was, did he do it? A fascination, by the way. I think the O.J. case came just about the time we were having that conference with Weitzman, weren't we?
I was in Israel when I got the phone call, to represent. We had an $800 fax bill from the King David Hotel because I wrote the first motion from the King David Hotel to get the grand jury dismissed, which succeeded.
I remember you telling me that. O.J. Simpson with the murder. I didn't know what was going on. I was too busy with Arthur Hertzberg.
Right.
He was a good Jewish man, by the way. I love his Yiddishisms. He's written a very important book called The Vanishing American Jew, and he says if you don't become proactive, then the Jew will probably assimilate and just disappear.
Well, not all Jews, because, you know, I have a chart in my book showing if you take 200 secular Jews and you project forward 4 generations, they'll produce 10 Jews with the current rates of intermarriage, assimilation, and childbearing. Take 200 Hasidic Jews, 4 generations hence, there'll be 5,200. So the Jews of America, by the middle of the 21st century, will be primarily Hasidic Jews, and then a lot of people of mixed heritage and partial Jewish background. The real question is whether the current vibrant Jewish community will survive as we know it, and we have to do something.
Hasidim follow a commandment called Peru Revu, which means multiply, and they do it.
They do it, and to their credit. I don't blame them.
Are you getting tough mail from the ultra-Orthodox Jews?
I got a wonderful letter from a Hasidic Rebbe saying, I don't love all the words in your book, but I love the music.
Right.
And I've gotten mostly very positive letters. Nobody in the world agrees with everything I say. Of course. You get 10 Jews in a room, you're going to get 20 opinions.
No, but you want to open a debate.
But the diagnosis, most people agree with the diagnosis of the problem. And the solutions, they're all up for grabs. People have misunderstood my book as calling for secular Judaism. I don't. I think Orthodox Judaism is the best guarantee of survival. I commend people who have complete faith and can completely comply with all the mitzvot of the Torah and the Talmud. It's just I don't want to write off those Jews who can't. I want to have an inclusive Judaism that doesn't say that if you're not an Orthodox Jew, you're not a Jew at all. That I reject.
Do you think the Agudas HaRabbanim, which was the right wing that came out with an edict or a statement saying that conservative and Reform Jews are basically not part of Judaism, do you think that was brought upon by the Shas party because of the law that's going on in Israel now?
I think there was a relationship between the politics of Israel and what was going on in the United States. By the way, I think there's a lot of intolerance among many secular Jews of the Orthodox. One of the things that we have to do is come together and remember that we're all Jews and that we have much more in common than separates us. And we have to stop this. We're the only right ones, whether it's the extremely secular who say we're the only right or the conservative or the Orthodox who say we're the only right ones. We all have to approach Judaism in the way that's most meaningful to us and to our children.
A fellow named Benjamin Bleck, who's a philosophy teacher at Yeshiva University, told me that in Israel, most of the grandchildren of a lot of people that we know are becoming more chomer, like you say. And it's sort of a race to who can top this. One guy doesn't watch television, the other one doesn't wear skirts, or they wear long sleeves, and the other one wears a shaitel, which is a...
Well, the New York Times had an interesting interpretation, and I thought it was very credible. It said, look, Orthodox Jews today have to send their kids to a yeshiva. Right. Who are the teachers? The teachers are not modern Orthodox, because modern Orthodox Jews have become lawyers and psychiatrists and university professors and stockbrokers. So who are the low-paid teachers? The ultra-Orthodox who really, really believe in this. So you send your modern Orthodox kid to a school that you think is modern Orthodox, will be taught by fervently Orthodox, and he's going to move to the right, and either he'll move you to the right, or there'll be a conflict. So there really is an issue here.
When I was in Rabbi Jacob Joseph, you remember that school?
Yeah, you were a great basketball player.
Right, orange and black.
Right.
I came in with a chidush, which is a new idea on the Haggadah. My Rebbe at that time was a right-wing type of guy that you're talking about, and he failed me, flunked me, and he sent me down to the principal, who's a man named Rabbi Weiss. Rabbi Weiss said, this is brilliant interpretation, and he called me an Eloi, which I'm not, but
it's a young genius.
A young genius. Right. He put me ahead in the class. The other rabbi was ready to throw me back and put me in the streets with Kahani's brother. You know what I mean?
Right.
And so you're absolutely right.
Yeah,
and if you don't get you know better than anybody about teaching. If you don't get a progressive person who opens your mind, you just get closed and claustrophobic.
But I have to tell you, I study Talmud myself every day. I study Torah every day because it helps me be a better teacher. And I use all kinds of Jewish cases and hypotheticals in my law school classes at Harvard. Next year I'll be teaching a course on the biblical sources of justice in Anglo-American law. I think just learning, the responsa is such a rich source. It's like the Jewish common law, the Mishnah, the Gemara. It's wonderful. And, a lot of secular Jews in Israel are now studying Jewish sources. You know why? They figured that the tragedy with Rabin led them to think that the fervently Orthodox are the only ones who know the sources, and they can't debate. Now the secular Jews are starting to study the Talmud so that they can debate. They can regain control over their sources. You're absolutely right. And it's nice. It's good.
It's a renaissance.
Yeah.
Yitzhak Rabin, who was a client of mine, a very close friend, and signed my ketubah, was not he was an Israeli more than he was a Jew. But in the end, he started to feel more Jewish. Maybe he was becoming a septuagenarian. You have something in your book where he was going to visit you a week before this. Itamar Rabinovich called you, and he said Rabin wanted to meet you and talk to you about
the level of debate. And he and his wife were both very worried. I had been on an interview on Israeli television where I talked about how words can kill. I spend my life defending free speech because I know how dangerous it can be. I know how powerful speech is. And I had offered to go to Israel and try to bring the right and the left together because I have roots in both groups. Many of my relatives in Israel are on the right, yet my best friends are the president of the Supreme Court, and justices, and other kinds of things. So I was hoping to start a dialogue, and then, of course, the meeting never occurred.
Very important point. Aaron Barak, a great judicial scholar, president of the Supreme Court of Israel, if he comes down with a ruling that is against the Orthodox Jews, he needs bodyguards today.
I went and had dinner with him when I was last in Israel, and he was surrounded with 2 bodyguards,
Yeah,
and I was so shocked.
Yeah.
And then he came to America and had to leave because the Israeli security forces couldn't guarantee his safety, not against Arab terrorists, but against Jews who might kill him.
Asa Weitzman said to me as a defense minister when we were doing Camp David, Leon, I don't need protection against the Arabs. It's the Jews I'm worried about.
Well, he was very prescient, and you know, I just couldn't believe what happened to Prime Minister Ebben. I refuse to believe it. The idea that a Jew, citing halachic sources, could kill a fellow Jewish elected Prime Minister of Israel just broke my heart.
But it's symptomatic. It
You know,
shows what's happening.
I had written my whole book, and I was about to send it to the publisher just before the Rebbe assassination.
changed it.
I pulled it back.
Yeah, I know.
I changed a lot of it. It confirmed my worst fears.
All right, let's go to your background because it's similar to mine. You know, what happened? How many people? Let's take your class. I'm sure you've done statistics.
Oh yeah, no, I know my class very well.
All right. How many remained Orthodox? Let's call them modern Orthodox, and how many became secularists?
I would say most remained Orthodox, and it depended on which neighborhood they moved into. It's true. If you move to West Hempstead and you live a Jewish Orthodox life, you're likely to be Orthodox. It's interesting. Of my 8 friends I grew up with in Borough Park, and I write about them in my book, we've all remained close friends. We get together all the time. The most religious among them, in my view, is a fellow who became a conservative Jew, and he's so active in the conservative movement, and he has chavurah groups in his house all the time, and he and his wife are the most spiritual Jews I know. My 4 of my 8 friends who are Orthodox are also very religious and very spiritual, and then 3 or 4 of us have become more secular. Every one of us is deeply involved in Jewish life. Every single one, 8 out of the 8, are deeply involved in Jewish life by our own lights. And we all go to Israel all the time. In fact, we're hoping to celebrate our joint 60th birthday coming up in a year and a half in Israel. We are all differently good Jews, I believe.
One of the theses in your book is that religion has very little to do with a lot of great Jews like Einstein, like Ben Gurion, like Chaim Weizmann. These were secular Jews, but they're still Jews. Yeah. Now, how do you define a Jew, Alan?
It's the hardest question.
I know.
It's the hardest question. I argue it. I can tell you what a Jew is not.
You want me to go to Johnny Cochran for the answer?
I can tell you what a Jew is not. A Jew is not just like a Catholic. It's not just a religion.
Right.
It's not just like being a Navajo Indian. It's not just a tribe. It's not just like being a Serb or a Croat. It's not just linguistic. It's not just like being a Pole or a German. Nationalistic. It is all of that and more. And it's so hard to define. You know, central to Judaism is obviously religion. But we have always had, certainly since the Haskalah, the Enlightenment in the beginning of the 19th century, there's always been a secular part of Judaism. Theodor Herzl was a very secular Jew. Achad Ha'am, who had studied Talmud, was a very informed secular Jew.
Most of the founders of Israel were
secular Jews.
Right.
Now, some of them were ignorantly secular Jews. Herzl, for example, had no Jewish education. I described when he was called up to the Torah during the Basel Zionist Conference, he was terrified to be called up for an aliyah. He had no idea what it was. He had no education at all. Whereas, of course, others, Chaim Weizmann was educated, Ben Gurion was educated. They were educated in different aspects of Judaism, but they're all Jews.
Hazer Weitzman was with me in Atlanta, Georgia, and I had Yortzeit, which is a Remembrance Day for my father, and I got up 6:30 to go to shul, and Weitzman got up and went with me as a defense minister. He says, Leon, my problem is I don't know as much as you, but then again, you can't fly planes.
Well, tell Ezra I apologize in any way for offending him. I did it in the most constructive way, I thought. I really did think that there was too much negativism about Zionism, but he and I have the same goals, and I have tremendous admiration for him as a person and as a president.
And we had good food at the conference.
It was good. And his house is beautiful.
You're very candid and you're very honest in your book. You talk about your son that married a non-Jew.
Right.
And so your grandchildren, are, according to the according to the Orthodox law, probably not Jewish, right?
Not yet.
Right, not yet.
Who knows? I mean, you know, this is
Tell me what happened to you internally. What happened to you?
It was obviously a very mixed message. You know, people say to me all the time, they ask me, how did it feel when your son told you, I'm marrying a woman of Irish Catholic background? That's not what he said to me. He said, I'm marrying Barbara. I know Barbara. I love Barbara. She's a wonderful, wonderful person. By the way, my children describe their marriage as interfaithless because neither one is particularly religious. I don't think my son would have lived a very different life had he married non-religious Jewish woman. My goal, though, I have a very, very specific goal. I want my grandchildren to love the Jewish part of their life. I want them, they were at the Seder, my granddaughter, Lori, got up and she said, "I love Passover. It brought tremendous joy to my heart." I want her to understand what it means to be a part of the Jewish tradition. I dedicate the book to my grandchildren. I say, the new links in an old chain. Many, many Jewish families are going to confront this situation in the years to come. And I've gotten so many letters from people saying, thank you for writing this, thank you for being open, thank you for bringing this out of the whisper and talking about your own experience, because we have the same experience, we've never been willing to talk about it. I want to have my children, my grandchildren, love the Jewish part of their heritage, not feel that they've been shunted away, not feel that they've been...
you wouldn't sit Shiva.
Oh, God.
Why do we have to explain that? That in the Orthodox Jewish circles, if a person marries out of his religion, the Orthodox family sat Shiva, and they were excommunicated from the family.
I love my grandchildren exactly the same as I would love them under any circumstances. I will not do anything in any way to treat them differently from any of my other grandchildren or children. And that's just me. I insist on that, and I think it's the right way to approach this. I love my daughter-in-law, and we're going to deal with this situation in the most constructive possible way. I love my son. He is a wonderful, wonderful young man with a great career and a great life, and giving and charitable, very Zionist, very strongly Jewishly identified, but he made a decision that I couldn't have made, but a decision that he made.
And what did your mother say? What did I do wrong?
My mother said, what did she do wrong? And, you know, she blamed herself, but she came to the wedding.
Really?
And, yep. And, you know, she is dealing with it in a constructive and positive way. Again, every Jewish family, except for the very Orthodox, are going to confront problems like this in the future. 53% rates of intermarriage, they will probably go up. 16% of young Jews today think it's not, that it's necessary to marry other Jews. The vast majority of young Jews think it's okay not to marry other Jews. And that means that we're going to have to deal with this problem in a constructive way.
All right, we're going to cut for a commercial break. We'll come right back, and Alan will not sit Shiva for his grandchildren,
Absolutely.
That's for sure. Don't leave us.
In modern Middle East history, only one peace treaty has stood the test of time, the 1978 Camp David Accord. In the new documentary film, Backdoor Channels, The Price of Peace, learn the true story behind the greatest diplomatic achievement of our time and its lessons for the future.
The price of peace is very high to have this courageous man and my close friend killed.
Winner of the Telly Award for Best Cultural Program. Now available at select stores including Barnes & Noble and online at Amazon.com. Get the book that inspired the award-winning movie, Leon Charney's Backdoor Channels. Learn about the Backdoor Channel negotiations that led to the historic 1978 Israeli-Egyptian peace treaty. Become a witness to history and order Backdoor Channels online at Amazon or Barnes & Noble. Also available at all other retailers and booksellers. Or download the audiobook at iTunes or Audible.com. Relive history. Order Backdoor Channels. Get best-selling author Leon Charney's latest book, The Battle of the Two Talmuds. Join Charney as he explores years of Jewish history to find out why and how Talmudic scholars and rabbis abandoned the Holy Land for the lands of the diaspora. Learn about the power struggles behind the creation of the Jerusalem and Babylonian Talmuds. It's a book critics call engaging and enlightening. A book which will be of interest to people of every faith. Now available at Amazon and Barnes & Noble, or download the audiobook of The Battle of the Two Talmuds at iTunes or Audible.com. Leon Charney sets out to discover the true meaning of the Kaddish, the Jewish custom of reciting a prayer to commemorate the death of a close relative. Join Charney as he finds out the history of the Kaddish and how it has evolved. Reviewed as a refreshing walk through Jewish history and a book that deserves to be read by both Jews and non-Jews, The Mystery of the Kaddish is now available online at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and all other retailers and booksellers. Or download the audiobook at Audible.com or on iTunes. Discover the mystery of the Kaddish.
I'm talking with Alan Dershowitz, who's written The Vanishing American Jew, In Search of Jewish Identity for the Next Century. And it's published by Little Brown, a good publisher, a very good publisher up in Boston, who, by the way, did Yitzhak Rabin's first book, which you should read. It's an interesting book. Alan, so you think that the answer is television?
Well, I think one answer is that we have to use modern technology to make Judaism much more interesting. I think that we have the greatest teachers in the world, Talmudic teachers, secular teachers, and I'm calling for the establishment of a 24-hour-a-day, 6-day-a-week international Jewish cable educational network in which the greatest teachers, the Rabbi Soloveitchiks of the day today, whether it be people from Israel or the United States, can teach courses in the widest range of subjects, Jewishly related, eclectic, on every possible topic, connected with the internet. I want to see the entire Jewish library, partly in Vilna today, partly in Tel Aviv, partly in Yerushalayim, partly in New York, brought together on the internet. I want to see classes that are really creative, and I'm trying to do my own part. I'm teaching this course at Harvard next year on scriptural bases of justice. I'm trying to encourage friends of mine to teach courses on Genesis and evolution. Jews have one thing that has been so powerful for 3,500 years, learning, education, and we can't neglect it.
But with all this, you're a pretty traditional guy, aren't you?
I'm traditional myself. I mean,
yes.
Friday night Shabbos, I don't work.
If OJ called you on a Saturday, what would happen?
He'd get my answering service. You know, I'm not strictly observant by any means, but Friday night we reserve for Shabbos. We have a family Shabbos dinner with my daughter. We usually invite some people over. I celebrate all the holidays. I always fast in Yom Kippur. I don't eat bread on Pesach. But, you know, we do it in our own way. And, you know, I belong to an Orthodox shul, the one my mother goes to and that I grew up in Borough Park.
Really?
I belong to a conservative shul in Cambridge. We belong to a Reform temple on Martha's Vineyard. It's the only temple there. And we go to a Reconstructionist place now in Cambridge because my daughter goes to school there. So I think of myself as a post-denominational, eclectic Jew. I love all of Judaism. And I also, if I had a chance to go to Rabbi Wein's synagogue on the outskirts of Detroit, which is a secular humanist Jewish synagogue, I'd go there. I love all kinds of Judaism. I love chavuras. I don't think we have to say only one kind of Judaism is right.
I'll bet you like cantorial music.
I love cantor. I sing it. I love cantorial music. And in fact, I'm working on an opera based on the life of a cantor who died during the Warsaw Ghetto. And I was in Atlanta a couple of weeks ago. You're going to get this videotape. I haven't seen it yet. But speaking in front of 3,000 people in Stuart Eisenstadt's family synagogue, and the Chazan invited me to sing with him.
All right, let's do it.
Sheyabona Beis HaMikdash, because I used to sing in Chagi and Kusevitzy's choir. Sheyabona Beis... No, I'm not going to do it. That's too much.
Sheyabona...
Oh, you're good.
All right, you got it.
You're good,
Alan
you're
Dershowitz
good.
and Leon Charney singing Chazanuk.
We should
go to
put
town
a rap
hall.
record. We should put a rap record together, right?
Most of people who had voices in Alan's age sang in the great choirs that they had. First of all, they had a phenomenal cantor there called Moshe Kosovitsky,
unbeatable.
who was one of the greatest. And Red Buttons did a shtick at the Concord Hotel this weekend, and he went to the Romanian shul where he hasn't been since 1929, and Red is married to a Puerto Rican woman for the last 40 years, and did a shtick called Avas Torah from the Samuel Sterner Choir or something like that. He tore the place apart.
Yeah.
So it's part of our life, our heritage. It touches us.
I tell you, my students come into my office at Harvard, and I'm sitting there and, you know, doing my work, and they're hearing in the background, you know, Herstag or Kusevitsky or Malavani or somebody singing Chazonish music. Look, if other professors can play rap music or classical music, why can't I play the music of my people? And Chazonish music is some of the most beautiful and unappreciated music in the world.
And it's coming back, though. I got good news for you, Alan. It's really coming back.
Shlomo Carlebach did more to rejuvenate Jewish music. You go to a Reform temple, you hear Carlebach. You go to Russia, you hear Carlebach. You go to an Orthodox, you hear Carlebach. You go to Chavurah. The man was amazing, and if he can do it and bring all these groups together through music, I think we can do it through learning and through intelligence and in other ways.
Yep. That's it. Mordechai Kaplan was a phenomenal scholar,
right?
Founder of Reconstructionist Judaism, and originally started off as an Orthodox Jew. You know his background, I'm sure, right?
Yes, I do. Yeah, and he's one of my real heroes. I think his concept of Judaism as a civilization is wonderful. And, you know, he challenged, and he looked to the 20th century, and he said, what kind of Judaism will be appropriate? And he didn't say it was the only kind. Again, he said, I want to offer my version. Jews have been doing this for thousands of years. When Hasidim first were established, they were put in cherem. They were excommunicated.
Right.
They were told they couldn't marry a real Jew. They couldn't be buried with real Jews. And you'd think that Hasidim, of all people, because they themselves suffered from the burdens of erroneous excommunication, would realize it's not the way. We try to bring people in, not throw them out.
My feeling, this is my feeling, Alan, my feeling is Judaism is ethics. This is mine. You have a chapter on it.
That's right. Be a Mensch is the name of my chapter.
Right. And you have some real stories in there about Jewish businessmen and the whole shtick. Is it your theory that the paramount concept of Judaism is ethics?
I think it is and it was, but let me tell you, because Jews are a beacon into the world, we have shared our ethics. You know, the old story of Hillel being asked how to describe the Torah, al regel achad, while standing on one leg, v'ahavta l'reacha kamocha, you should love your neighbor as yourself. Well, everybody believes in that now. We won, we prevailed, we got that view accepted. If you read Jesus' Sermon on the Mount, you will see in it the Psalms of David. You will see in Christianity so much of Jewish ethics. You will see in Islam so much of Jewish ethics that today there's not much left of Jewish ethics which is uniquely Jewish. We have succeeded. We have persuaded others in the world to accept our ethics. Ethics today is largely Jewish ethics. And so we have to move beyond the ethical and study the sources and go back.
Is that from the Ten Commandments?
Well, I think it's, you know, it's interesting. I tell a story in my book. The Ten Commandments used to be in the shuls. They used to put them in the Siddur. And they took them out of the Siddur because they didn't want anybody to think you can encapsulate Judaism in 10 rules. It's much more complex. The people who designed the Siddur early on in history. And you can't just say, these are, you know, with all due respect even to Rabbi Hillel, there's no one essence of Judaism. It comes awfully close. I mean, my essence of Judaism is learn, learn, learn. Just keep studying, keep challenging, keep questioning. Learn the sources, understand the sources. I mean, if there's one book that every human being on the face of the earth should read, it is the Jewish Bible. I mean, there is no other book that has had the influence the Jewish Bible has had, and yet Jews know Homer, they know Plato, they don't know the Jewish Bible. They have a coloring book recollection of Joseph in his multicolored coat. They remember Charlton Heston standing and splitting the waters. That's Jewish education. You know, we get our culture from Jackie Mason, God bless him. We get our, you know, our Bible from television, from that show on PBS about Genesis. We have so much we can get out of our books.
It's fascinating, isn't it? We as Jews will learn everything about Greek mythology and everything about Socrates and Plato. But yet, you might ask a Jew about Moses and who was his wife, Zipporah, and probably very few will know the answer.
And now, this year, Jews know more about Genesis because Bill Moyers taught it to us. I mean, that's great. But why didn't we learn it from our teachers, our rabbis? Why aren't we allocating more resources to Jewish education? Why aren't we using computers creatively? You know, none of us would send our kids to a high school unless it was the best high school around. But we are prepared to send them to Jewish education, which doesn't meet those standards. You know, they're starting at Brandeis University, and I'm active in this, in support of this, a new Jewish high school that wants to be, it aspires to be the best high school in the United States. And why not? I write in my book about Australian Jewish high schools, best in the country. South African Jewish high schools, best in the country. We have some Jewish high schools that are sensationally good. But we have to have more schools that Jews can feel comfortable going to and that will teach them how to be competitively advantageous in the real world. Because I think Judaism and the Talmud and the Torah gives you a competitive advantage in whatever profession you want to have.
When you were young, and I assume you had an inquiring mind, you just didn't develop it at Harvard. If you'd ask a rabbi a question, how would he respond to you?
The response was, if it was such a good question, then the Rebbes before you would have thought about it first. And if the Rebbes before you didn't think about it first, it can't be such a good question. So it was such a squelching of creativity. And you know, you have to engage. I went to a very good high school. You know, we learned evolution in the afternoon, we learned creation in the morning, but we never had a discussion about reconciling the two. We had them at lunch among the kids, but what an opportunity to look at two worldviews, a God-centered worldview and a science or secular-centered worldview. You know, I am agnostic about everything. I'm agnostic about science. I'm agnostic about law. I'm agnostic about religion. I'm a questioning person, and I think that's central to Judaism. Just read a book of the writings of Lubavitcher Rabbi. They're full of
Simon
doubt.
Jacobson?
Right, they're full of doubt.
He was on the show.
Right, you read the writings of the great Rabbi Soloveitchik. There's doubt. It's not just accepting.
Maimonides.
Maimonides.
Why did he write Moreh Nevuchim, Guide to the Perplexed?
Of course.
Because he was tortured, and he was nearly excommunicated. Do you realize that?
I know, of course. Look, any good Jew was nearly excommunicated.
Any
That's
good
the
learning
history.
Jew,
Learning
right.
Jew. Any creative person who challenges the status quo.
Do you think that you would have been a different person if you went to one of these best, superior Jewish high schools that were ever created? Do you think you'd be different today?
Could be. I don't know. I think I didn't get the best possible Jewish education. But let me tell you what I did get. I got a Jewish education which lets me read on my own. I can make my way through, you know, the Gemara in Aramaic. I can make my way through Rashi. I can make my way through the Torah. Now there's, of course, great English translations, and many of them are very, very good. And I don't know whether I would have been different.
Aaron Steinholtz?
Steinholtz is wonderful. It's wonderful.
Have you met him?
I've never met him, but I've seen him.
Supposed to be a very interesting man.
He would be great on this national cable TV educational network giving a course in Talmud.
A fellow like Gitz Greenberg, who saw the liberal side of modern Orthodoxy.
One of my great heroes.
All right. Is he in trouble with...
He's not in trouble only because...
a lot?
He's attacked a lot, but he's not in trouble only because he has so much integrity and so much courage. He and Blue have redefined the landscape in many respects of modern, intelligent Judaism. You know, he had a chance to become a professor at Harvard. He's a PhD in history. He was, talking about E. Louis, he was one of the most brilliant people that ever came out of Borough Park. And he decided to devote... Of course. Grew up 49th Street, between 13th and 14th
Chops his
Avenue.
pizza or something like that?
No, his father was a great Rebbe.
Is that right?
And I knew him. I knew him as the tall kid, the tall, gawky kid in the neighborhood. He was my first counselor in Camp Eton when I was 14. And he was one of the first people to say to me, Avi, my name was Avi at the time, he said, Avi, you know, you're pretty smart. But when my teachers were telling me I wasn't. So I have a tremendous amount of love for Yitz Greenberg, and it hurts me to see him attacked so much by unthinking people on the extreme right.
Well, you know, there's a new, I don't know what you call it, but sort of a grouping of the modern Orthodox Saul Berman. I don't know if you know Saul.
Of course I know
Saul Berman, Greenberg, and I think Steinhardt is funding this. And they're trying to get sort of...
It's a wonderful, wonderful organization.
You know about it?
I know about it. I support it tremendously. I hope that they get well funded because it's the bridge to the future. I think you need to confront modernity. You need to have a Judaism that doesn't regard America as irrelevant, but lives in America, not just surrounded by America. And that's the kind of Judaism that Yitz Greenberg advocates.
Great to see you. It's a must-read. Alan Dershowitz's book, The Vanishing American Jew.
In modern Middle East history, only one peace treaty has stood the test of time, the 1978 Camp David Accord. In the new documentary film, Backdoor Channels, The Price of Peace, learn the true story behind the greatest diplomatic achievement of our time and its lessons for the future.
The price of peace is very high to have this courageous man and my close friend killed.
Winner of the Telly Award for Best Cultural Program. Now available at select stores including Barnes & Noble and online at Amazon.com. Get the book that inspired the award-winning movie, Leon Charney's Backdoor Channels. Learn about the Backdoor Channel negotiations that led to the historic 1978 Israeli-Egyptian peace treaty. Become a witness to history and order Backdoor Channels online at Amazon or Barnes & Noble. Also available at all other retailers and booksellers. Or download the audiobook at iTunes or Audible.com. Relive history. Order Backdoor Channels. Get best-selling author Leon Charney's latest book, The Battle of the Two Talmuds. Join Charney as he explores years of Jewish history to find out why and how Talmudic scholars and rabbis abandoned the Holy Land for the lands of the diaspora. Learn about the power struggles behind the creation of the Jerusalem and Babylonian Talmuds. It's a book critics call engaging and enlightening. A book which will be of interest to people of every faith. Now available at Amazon and Barnes & Noble, or download the audiobook of The Battle of the Two Talmuds at iTunes or Audible.com. Leon Charney sets out to discover the true meaning of the Kaddish, the Jewish custom of reciting a prayer to commemorate the death of a close relative. Join Charney as he finds out the history of the Kaddish and how it has evolved. Reviewed as a refreshing walk through Jewish history and a book that deserves to be read by both Jews and non-Jews, The Mystery of the Kaddish is now available online at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and all other retailers and booksellers, or download the audiobook at audible.com or on iTunes. Discover The Mystery of the Kaddish. Though Alan Dershowitz talked about the vanishing American Jew, the Folksbiene Theater, the National Yiddish Theater, headed by Zalman Malotek and Bryna Wasserman, celebrate the arrival of the Jews in the United States in their musical, The Golden Land, now extended at the Baruch College Theater.
The Golden Land was always one of the strongest pieces in terms of attracting new audiences. And our goal at the National Yiddish Theater is to make sure that people are coming who have no concept of Yiddish or no knowledge of Yiddish whatsoever, but we want them to come to get a flavor of it. So the Golden Land is mostly in English, with Yiddish songs throughout and translated in various different ways. And because it's an important story that people need to know, the immigration story of the Jews, which also resonates for other immigrant groups.
Poland, Russia?
Russia! Yes, Russia.
Good. What's your name?
Name.
Your name.
Name. Ich verstehe nicht kein Wort.
Name, your name. Mr., Monsieur, Господин, Signor.
Oh, Nomen. Nomen! For was sagt nicht? My name is... Schon vergessen.
John Ferguson.
So we have a wonderful cast. We have Bob Ader, Sandy Rosenberg, Stacey Harris, Andrew Keltz, Daniela Rabbani, and Cooper Grodin. Many Broadway veterans, some off-Broadway veterans, but what's fascinating is how these 6 people have become a family. And people are amazed, A, that they didn't know any Yiddish 3 weeks ago before they started, except for Daniela, she knew some Yiddish. None of them knew at all. And that they hadn't known each other for years because of the chemistry. What Bryna has created on the stage, you know, from a directorial point of view, is this family that we see evolve. It's not the same family, it's not the same, but this family of actors, how they've worked together.
And they have to represent 50 characters at least. There are 50 musical numbers, and they're moving constantly, and every move was thought of, and there's no waste. We have an incredible group of designers that finish the product. And now the audience, and how the audience and the actors connect is, of course,
and we have a great band. We have a great band.
Oh, yeah.
You know, a great band that's, you know, that's...
That rocks.
That rocks, yeah.
It's a sensitive piece that has a musical journey. And it really tells the story in a succinct and musical way. The music is very authentic, the story is authentic, and it is an incredible experience for the actors to share with an audience of today. I think every student who is studying immigration, or anyone who wants to find out about their roots, or where did they come from, what kind of experience, what is it to integrate, and what is the mobility, and what does America offer that no other country in the world offers.
We've had student groups that one particular group was from the Duke Ellington School in Harlem. They brought 100 fourth graders, African American and Hispanic kids, who just sat there rapt and with questions, incredible questions at the end, very fascinated with it. So the audiences, you know, we're happy that younger audiences are coming as well, and also non-Jewish audiences.
As a Canadian looking at it from an American perspective, you really get an entirely different view, because you're experiencing it on a very personal level, and experiencing the music and understanding the appeal. And mainly the appeal is that celebration of freedom, that celebration that we can all share.
You mean he wasn't accepted? Can you believe it? Because he was Jewish, they wouldn't let him in. Setting quotas in an Ivy League school. And with his grades yet. Abolish immigration quotas. Open the doors for European Jews. Sign the petition. Sign it now. What are you talking about?
People want to come see this play, and we want it to go on, and it may go on forever. But this extension is limited, and we want as many people to have an opportunity to see this joyful, wonderful musical story at Baruch College.
It's 25th Street between Lexington and 3rd Avenue. People can go to our website and get tickets at nationalyidishtheater.org. But this play is completely, woven together, English and Yiddish the whole time, so that people, and all the dialogue is in English. So people, there's never a moment where someone is saying, well, what's going on? Because either, if they're singing a Yiddish song, either we've introduced it at the same time before, or simultaneously you're hearing the English. So we're totally cognizant, because we want the audience to know what we're talking about.